I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the board, Boulder Valley Board of Education, for today, Tuesday, January 23rd. And Laura, would you please call the roll?
Benford. Fuqua. Garcia.
Here.
Gebhardt.
Here.
Marquis.
Here.
Myers.
Here.
Sargent.
Here. Okay, please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge my allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to remind everybody that the mission of the Boulder Valley School District is to create challenging, meaningful, and engaging learning opportunities so that all children thrive and are prepared for successful, civically engaged lives. Good evening, and thank you for coming to the Ed Center for today's meeting. We're going to start with the superintendent's report. Dr. Stevenson.
I will be very brief so we can get on to our other business tonight. I just wanted you to know that last week Eisenhower Elementary had their annual Martin Luther King Day celebration. They have it at the University of Colorado in the Glenn Miller Ballroom, and it was a truly amazing performance by a total student body with lots of music, lots of speaking, and I just have to say Boulder Valley should be proud of its children because of the way they can perform and the things they're learning. It was a remarkable morning, and I just couldn't top that with anything else, so thank you.
Thank you. So our next item, we're thrilled tonight to have some student communication. So I think Mark is coming up to the podium.
Yes,
Thanks so much for being here.
President Marquez, members of the Boulder Valley School District, Board of Education, and Superintendent Stevenson. Good evening. Tonight, we continue with some student visitors who will be speaking to you about some of the work that we're doing on the high school student advisory committee, as well as Lead Boulder. So we have three awesome students who are going to introduce themselves and speak to you.
Hi, my name is Bergen Beatty, and I'm currently a senior at Boulder High School, and this is my first year being a part of the high school SAC committee. This year I'm very excited and honored to serve on the high school SAC committee. Being a leader is something that is very important to my identity, and by having the opportunity to come together with leaders across BVSD from different schools, I've not only grown my strengths as a leader, but I also feel that it has further inspired me to ignite changes, not only in my school, but across the BVSD school system as well. We have recently talked about a lot of topics and gone into smaller groups to really target and focus on what we want to see change in the Boulder Valley School Districts. So for my group in particular, we are focusing on student-teacher relationships, and myself and my peers believe that it is really important for a school and almost vital for students to have healthy relationships with their teachers so they can count on them as a mentor both inside and outside of the classroom. And we believe that if students have these relationships and they foster them from day one as they walk into a school, not only will they feel safe in their school environment, but they'll also have a stronger sense of community and a stronger sense of school pride. So in our latest SAC meeting, my group and I brainstormed a list of characteristics that we felt all the teachers we personally have connected with, we personally view as mentors, have in common. And although we are aware that a student may not be able to have this connection with every teacher, we hope that by coming up with solutions that both educate the student body and also the faculty on how to foster these relationships, that each student can get a chance in order to create a relationship like this with their teacher throughout their career at BVSD schools. I'm very eager to continue working alongside of my peers this semester and to leave a positive mark on all BVSD schools. Thank you.
Hello, Board of Education. My name is Tarun Amasa. I'm a sophomore at Fairview High School. Since middle school through kindergarten, I went to a school in Adams 12. And one of the biggest things that I thought that I could, the one thing I thought when I went to high school is I wanted to make a change in the community, right? Gandhi once said, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." And I'm super honored to be part of a program where I can make a change or where I can influence things in the district. I really love being in an area with all these kids from all these different high schools, hearing their opinions on issues, on topics. It's awesome to have Mr. Schaefer. He always brings some humor in the room. He's a great guy, and I really enjoy the program that they have set in place. In no other place I think that we can have such a huge voice, and I'm so honored to have that platform to talk to you and have some of your valuable time. The project that my specific group is working on is focusing on issues surrounding mental health and drug abuse. Currently, we feel like how it is right now, there's so many awesome programs that the Boulder Valley District provides. However, I don't think a lot of people are aware. I know this may touch on hundreds of lives, but I feel like there's such a bigger impact that we can make. For a lot of kids, going from a situation from not talking to a single person about their problems to then talking to their teacher, potentially getting the whole administration involved, we feel like this creates a sense of fear for the students, feeling like I came from a place where I didn't tell anyone of something to telling the whole district about something. So something we're really focused on is making some peer programs, places where peer-to-peer influence, where we can provide, we feel like the missing link in helping all the students that don't speak about their problems, because I know there are many of them. I know the Board of Education has touched on so many lives, and I know people who are very thankful for all you have done. But there are also those who are afraid to speak because they feel like they might get punished by other people, or they're going to an audience that they don't feel like is welcoming, or an audience that they don't feel comfortable in, going from a place not speaking to anyone. So we feel like if we make a connection between a peer-to-peer, having someone that you can talk to, someone you can connect to, this will really encourage them. I'm so happy to be part of a group that with so many ideas and so many intelligent minds. It's awesome to be in that area. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Hi, my name is Megan Banks. I'm currently a junior at Monarch High School in Louisville. I have the wonderful opportunity of being a part of Lead Boulder, a program that was started a couple years ago, as well as the Student Advisory Council for the high school district. As for Lead Boulder, this program is like a 2-year-long program. I've had the opportunity to meet with 25 other students from across the district. With that, what we are working towards is kind of creating capstone projects in order to give back to our community. But most importantly, right now, we're kind of figuring out ourselves as an individual and how we fit as a group. This has been something that's been really, really amazing for me. And I've just learned a lot more about myself, my values, and how I am able to fit into a larger group for something more. With that, like I said, I've gotten to meet so many people. One thing about me, I'm not the most vulnerable person, but I've really been able to expand my leadership skills through this. As for SAC, I've also really, really enjoyed this as well. It's so great to have a lot of different students across different age groups and grades. So Lead Boulder, it's all juniors across BVSD, but our SAC committee is completely from freshman to senior year. With that, my group is actually working on college and beyond. Basically what we're trying to do is prepare our students in the district to get furthering their education and other post-grad opportunities. So whether it's not college, whether it's a service project, whether it's a gap year or something, we're trying to get students more prepared and feel them to ease into it, because junior year so far has been a little bit stressful with trying to manage my grades, as well as my ACT and my SAT and college applications have been starting. So we're trying to just make that process a lot easier. Kind of to restate though, I am so thankful to have this opportunity to work with Dr. Schaefer as well as a lot of the other students. It's such a diverse community, and it's so interesting to see all the people brought together. So thank you. Do you have any questions for us?
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Any questions or comments, board members? Kathy?
So I have a question. Is your first name Barden? Did I write that down?
Bergen.
Burden. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you just give us an example of some of the characteristics that you guys identified that you thought would be helpful for teachers in building that teacher-student relationship?
Yeah, of course. So one of the things when we were all kind of reminiscing in the past teachers that we really felt a connection with, the first thing that we all found in common was on the first day of school, instead of jumping right into academics, they were like, okay, my name is Miss So-and-so. This is about me. I grew up here. And they gave us a personal story. And so we all agreed that because of that personal story and showing us, instead of just being a teacher and an authority, I'm a real person, I'm here for you, it made the students feel like I can be vulnerable with this person. I can go in and talk to them, I can ask for help, because, oh, look, they aren't just completely successful all of their lives. They talked about maybe a subject that they weren't really good at. I'm not good at that subject. So we really feel that just by opening up to the students as more than just a teacher and showcasing their personality and going into the students and into the classroom on a more personal level really help the students be able to connect with them later on in the year.
Any other comments or?
I love you guys. To hear you speak is so inspiring to me, because you're just so, your presence, I felt it. And I think I sat beside you, Megan, at the breakfast.
Yeah.
So it's good to see you again. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for letting us know what's going on in SAC. It's always so great to hear that you guys are tackling such tough subjects. And they're all great. And I'd just like to say the peer counseling idea, I think, is brilliant. I mean, I know exactly what you mean about how it's hard for kids to say something and then they think then they lose control of what they're trying to say. And so I think this is a really, really great idea.
Richard?
I just want to say thank you so much for your reports. I think it's great to hear from the students the mental health and drug abuse effort that you're doing. I think is great, and then working with the student-teacher relationships, I think is wonderful too. I think that's something that we should be doing from here too. So, but thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Kitty?
Yeah, I just want to echo the thanks too. I just love hearing kids come and talk about what they're involved in and seeing young people being so involved and really caring and really invested in what you're doing. And I'm always happy to see somebody from my kids' school, which is Monarch.
And Kathy?
One last thing, I just also really want to say that the idea that you have from Monarch, Megan, about the public service projects for the Lead Boulder as capstones, I think is a really interesting way to look at capstones, and it sounds like it's going to be a really exciting project, and look forward to hearing about that.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you guys for having us today.
So next up, we have a report from the District Accountability Committee. We have Lisa Medler and FP.
Thank you, Board. We are here tonight to offer our recommendation on spending priorities from the District Accountability Committee. So I am Lisa Medler. I'm on the exec team.
And I'm FP Fournier.
So we had the opportunity to talk with you about a month ago, or a few weeks ago, in a work session. So we'll keep this somewhat brief. We, in the meantime, since we met with you, have had a chance to go back to the District Accountability Committee and get an official vote. So the memo that you have in front of you is no longer in draft and has taken on a couple different iterations. But just to summarize, because we know we've got some people here in the audience as well, we made 3 main recommendations. And I want to be really clear, while they look somewhat similar to past recommendations, we absolutely approach this each year as freshly as possible and really take the time to dig in and gather data. And so all these recommendations are based on the data gathering that we've done. And so that includes looking at student performance data, really anything that we can get our hands on, and as well as the school accountability survey, which we have appended a summary of for you, as well as observations of the student performance data. So based on that analysis, what the group is recommending is a focus on equity and supports for all students. One of the differences probably from the draft that we shared with you before is we tried to go back and at least give you some more specific examples. And I know that's something, just having heard you guys in the last work session, you would prefer. So again, based it on the data, based it on the survey, based it on the conversations in the DAC meetings. So you can read that there. So there's some examples. The second recommendation is, again, on socio-emotional learning and supports. Again, tried to add in some more examples for you there. So those are in front of you. And then finally, and this is a new one from past years, a focus on transparency and progress reporting. So this one, we actually don't think would take a very large investment, but we really wanted to highlight it because I think we wanted to convey that if the group like the DAC or the public is to be able to provide you with data-driven recommendations, we really need access to the data. And so with we feel like modest investments in public reporting and a commitment to collection of data, then, it'll help with the transparency, but then also enable us to actually gauge the success of the investments that we're making, that you guys are deciding on, so that we can know if that's the right direction and then go on from there. So that just really quickly outlines it for you. FP and our other exec team member, Nicole, who couldn't make it tonight, really spent quite a bit of time on that survey. I know that's something that's of great interest to you, so he can definitely answer questions there. With that, unless FP wants to add anything, I'm going to open it up to you guys.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for being accommodating with the schedule change. So I really appreciate
Thank you.
all the work you did and your flexibility, and we obviously look forward to your recommendations every year. Board members, any questions or comments? I have a question. Oh, you know what? Actually, I'm going to strike that. Sorry. Someone go first. Kathy.
So in your attachment on student growth, you have questions from DAC at the very end.
Oh, yep.
How do you want to go about addressing some of those? Are those questions you want further participation from the board on, or is DAC looking at it? Because they're great questions. I'm just wondering what the next steps would be to look at those.
So we leave that really to you guys. If I had the answers, I probably wouldn't have included them, or we wouldn't have included them. But as in looking through the questions, I think you guys know, at least veterans on the board know that the DAC really take their job seriously and really try and look at things quite thoroughly. And so we asked them to write down some of their observations and remaining questions. And as we went through them, we felt like these were some issues that were thought-provoking and wanted to at least share them with you. So happy to have further conversation. I don't necessarily have the answers, though, sorry.
I think what I was trying to figure out, too, and we don't have to talk about this now, is how we partner in trying to get to the answers to some of those, because they're obviously really good questions that don't have easy answers, or as you say, we would not have these questions.
Yep. We would love to partner and do more follow-up and discussion.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Okay. Shelley?
Thank you, Lisa and FP. So when you say modest investments in transparency and progress reporting, I mean, are you thinking more like whatever investment it takes to get the information we already have out there? Is that primarily what you're talking about?
And I think in comparison to maybe some of the other recommendations that have been made, certainly in comparison to like ongoing investments in staff, like the counselor commitment that's been made by the board, that's a pretty hefty ongoing commitment. So I think in our thinking, it was more with some upfront investments than some of the ongoing costs, maybe less. That was really the thinking. And I think it was also, maybe a better way to frame it would be sort of a range of, it could be as simple as a commitment to actually taking the data that's available and investing in some intuitive reporting, all the way to, investing in off-the-shelf interim assessments, something like that. So there's a range there. Do you want to say anything else?
I'll just add that it's possible that we would need to invest in new tools. For example, we have iReady right now for literacy. We don't have anything for math, from my understanding. So maybe we need to invest in the math component of iReady or something like that.
Is that why you call out math in this one bullet point here?
That's part of the reason.
Okay, because we already have iReady for literacy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I really, for your last bullet point here, administering surveys about, stakeholders' perception of BVSD's performance, is that something different than the climate survey we used? Something new that encompasses more than what that climate survey did, or is that talking about bringing that climate survey back? Or
Yeah, I'll jump in and then go ahead and add to it. I think, to be honest, we struggled just finding any data sources available to us at this point in time. So I think that was just sort of a plea for, getting the student perception survey and having access to that in the past was very helpful. Certainly, teacher perception surveys. We know there's a perception survey coming up actually pretty soon. So having access to that, I mean, just really anything that this group can sort through and help inform decisions would be helpful. Even parent surveys, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, it's been a few years since we administered that culture
Yes.
survey, and I thought that was not a good idea to get rid of that to start with, but now I'm thinking if we administered the exact same one, we would have really interesting data from like 3 years ago
Yeah.
to now, and we
Yeah.
could see how things have shifted, so.
Yeah.
I mean, I think even though it might not have been the best survey, it would give us some real,
Yeah.
a baseline,
Yeah.
and then to see where we are now.
Yeah,
so,
that having access to longitudinal data would
Yeah.
be very helpful.
Yeah.
If
And
I
just,
If I
go
can
ahead.
point this out, so I don't have any opinion on whether we should use the old survey or a new survey, but what we do know from our own survey is that the schools are very much interested in finding out how much progress is being made regarding social and emotional well-being. And so since we're investing in that, this might be a way of measuring how well we're making progress.
Right. Yeah, I see that, the evidence-based SEL programs. I think it's come up among us that we've put these new counselors in now, how are we gonna measure their impact? And I think that would be something really helpful from DAC that you could offer the board is, how do you measure that? Is it decreased incidences of bullying? Is it, better grades? Is it, what is it
Right.
that we would be measuring that impact?
Right.
So that'd be helpful. But thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Any other questions? Richard?
Lisa, thank you very much for the report and the DAC folks for the report. And thank you for that special memo to me too. So,
FP took the lead on that.
so I appreciate that. Where was I here? On the identification of student SEL needs, are we looking at maybe a screening tool of some sort, or did you talk about how you go about identifying those?
Do you want to jump in, and then I can add to it?
Yeah, so from what I know, we didn't discuss specifically how we would go about this. I think that's really up to the district.
Thanks.
You want to say?
No, it's okay. I'll let it go. It's fine.
Okay, Donna?
You did answer my question on why math became the focus on, so I guess it's because of the iReady scores are available, but there's not something similar in math? Is that the thought on why that?
Yeah, I think to call that out specifically, that we don't want to lose sight of math and not having access to that. I mean, actually, I would say that even the iReady reports, we weren't able to get access to those at the DAC meeting, so district level trends and then disaggregated by different groups of students would be really helpful. And I think the district sounds like they are working on some internal tools, and they just haven't had something that they could share publicly with a group like the District Accountability Committee. So while that data is there, that's why we want that investment in reporting. But then specifically, we know that in math, that we don't necessarily have common assessments there, or at least that's our understanding.
And one other question, I do appreciate all your work, fabulous work. So, and I know you put in lots of hours, but on the part under social emotional learning, the evidence, the improving family supports, with our family involvement director, and I know Anna Stewart runs the family partner network, does a resource fair. What additional thoughts are you having as far as the family supports?
Do you want to jump in first?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I think what you're seeing here is a reflection of what was coming out of the school accountability committees. So anything that you're going to hear from us is just speculation and our opinion. So I want to preface it with that. And I would want to be clear that while some resources may be available in some places, it's not necessarily available in all places. And I know in representing a high school, they were so happy to support things like the counselors and the elementary schools, but there's a real need, even in schools that seem to be doing pretty well, to be able to connect with families, to be able to provide resources or at least advise where to go for mental health issues or trauma or crisis. And I've heard that as a parent in the middle school, in the high school, just diminishing resources out in the community and diminishing resources for this in the schools. So while an initial investment is good, there's needs literally everywhere, especially on this topic. I don't know if that helps.
Thanks, it does. I was just wondering if DAC communicated at all with some of the resources that are currently available. I did discuss with Anna Stewart today. I was asking her how many parents were involved in her parenting. It's more like a parenting class that her and Leslie give together, and she said about 50 parents are involved. So I didn't know, but that's more at the elementary level. So I didn't know where you were asking for extra supports.
Everywhere.
Okay. and I heard you say a lot in the high school.
Well, no, I actually have been really impressed that representatives from the high schools and middle schools have been very supportive of the investment at the elementary. So that everyone wanted to prioritize that. But I think there's also a fear of getting lost or forgotten, and that there really is still a need. Because there's not as much available out in the community, the schools are kind of a go-to, and so there's still a need there, if that helps.
Thank you.
Any other questions, board members? No? Okay, so hearing none, thank you so much for your work.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item is public hearing and public participation. The board recognizes the value of public comment on issues related to the operation of the schools. Oops. Excuse me. To ensure that our meeting is conducted in an orderly manner, we ask that persons who address the board confine your comments to matters that are germane to the business of the school district. Speakers on agenda items will be heard first, followed by those speaking to non-agenda items. Limit your presentation to 2 minutes. If we go over the first hour, public comment will continue at the end of the meeting. Recognize that students often attend or view our meetings. Speakers' remarks, therefore, should be suitable for an audience that includes kindergarten through 12th grade students. The board president may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement that is unrelated to the business of the district or inappropriate for K-12 students. There is a lighting system on the podium, starting at green when your 2 minutes starts, turning to yellow when you have 30 seconds remaining, and turning to red at the end. When the light turns red, please wrap up your comments so that the board can hear from the maximum number of speakers. So we have 5 speakers signed up tonight, and we have 2 on agenda items, and we'll start with Carl Hill.
I didn't know I'd be first. So I just speak here? Thank you all. We just moved here. This is my wife, Christina. And we moved here over the summer from Seattle. And we're speaking about the proposed sale of the 10 acres off Glenmore, off Ridgely Hills, which I understood that, so we purchased over the summer. And we had 3 concerns. I think Chris and Janet also are lined up to speak as well. So we're just learning about the neighborhood and about Boulder and everything. We had 3 thoughts about it, the sale of the property. One is concerns about the development itself, just in terms of it having been a de facto community open space for the last 40 years. And I think Chris will speak more to that than I will. From our perspective, we had 2 other concerns. One is that if these 10 acres are to be developed, we were concerned that it be in keeping with the neighborhood and that there not be high-density, lots of houses being put into there. It's a very quiet neighborhood, and we have some concerns about that. And the other is that where our house is on the west side of that open space, and we see lots of community members using that to access Sombrero Marsh and the open space there. And we want to make sure that they still have that access. So if it is sold, that was another concern, that they be able to go through that into the open space to the north. Christina, did we have were those the main things? Do you want to be up here?
That's time. Thank you.
My time might be up. Pardon? So she
Yes, your
says my
time's up, yep.
So those were our three things, was what were really concerns about the development in the first place, that if it is done, that it's in keeping with the neighborhood, and that if it is done, that people have access to the open space to the north.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Our next speaker is Chris Kerner, and I hope I got that correct, the pronunciation.
So I'm up here kind of to echo what Carl said. I guess my first comments are, it's very difficult in a process like this for neighborhoods to have any involvement, so there hasn't really been any meeting or hearing and any public input. I know there's been a thing in the paper. I tried to find out, they said that the school district bought the property. I tried to find that out. The deed says in consideration of $10, and that's what was also written in the article in Daily Camera. However, there's a lot on the corner up kind of in the northeast corner of that also says in consideration of $10, but then you look on next to the deed on the county records and it's actually $33,000. So I'm not sure whether the property was actually bought by the school district. It was a long time ago. I don't know, you guys may have information that we don't have, but I know one thing, Rex Walker is still alive, and I called him up to see, because he's the person who actually sold the property or deeded the property to the school district. So my kind of goal in this is maybe you guys should take a step back, give a couple of months to the community, maybe have a community meeting where citizens can come in and attend. Boulder County Parks and Open Space and the City of Boulder Open Space could all get together and kind of figure out how to use this property. I think if you move forward on the real estate, there's going to be some blowback, is a nice way to put it. Another consideration is the water rights. The large tract does not have water rights. It's not part of Hoover Hills, which you guys have advertised it as, but it isn't. If you go to Hoover Hills map, so I'm not sure where they're going to get their water for that particular tract, which is another consideration. Last thing I think Carl kind of talked about, if this was a private land, it would probably fall under what's called adverse possession. And just my quick comment, adverse possession is where a tract of land that's private is used by somebody else for a period of time, and then it becomes the user's land. Fortunately, you guys aren't under that because you're a school district, which is a public entity, but lots of people use that property, and a lot of them assume that it's part of Boulder County Parks and Open Space. So thanks for your time.
Thanks so much. Okay, now speaking on non-agenda items, we'll start with Michael Guidarelli.
Good evening, Superintendent Stevenson, school board members, staff, and guests. My name is Michael Guidarelli, and I was here in your December board meeting to discuss the critical need for cameras on Boulder Valley school buses. I think I speak for all bus drivers when I say that we feel marginalized in several areas, and one of those areas is we don't have our back covered when we're driving the bus with students aboard, and incidents take place. What brought me here tonight was an incident that took place last Thursday afternoon at one of the schools. my bus was still parked at school, and an incident took place on the bus. I radioed dispatch to have administrator come out to my bus. When the administrator arrived, I explained the situation, and the persons involved were named. One of the students named chose to leave the bus and walk home. The other student was called off the bus to give an explanation and chose to lie about what had taken place. This happens almost, every other week on one of my runs. I and my fellow bus drivers are tired of having to defend ourselves and leave the final decision of an incident to the whim of an administrator. So I'm asking, again, if you would please consider having cameras on a bus. It would protect your good drivers. It would help maintain a more safe, peaceful, and pleasant ride for the students, and would help rein in problem students as well as problem drivers. So I appreciate your time listening tonight, and I look forward to a positive outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Janine Wire.
Good evening, Board. Dr. Stevenson. I'm here to talk to you tonight about some of the positive outcomes that have been happening around kids with dyslexia in the district, and also to ask that you consider an expansion of the funding for some of these programs in your upcoming budget. Firstly, the Literacy Materials Adoption Committee has been looking very thoroughly at the foundational skills of the literacy materials to be adopted, amongst other things. But I was very pleased to see the amount of effort that was going in to ensure that there'd be a strong foundation component to the new literacy materials. The point schools, the 7-point schools that are receiving OG training, I've heard fantastic feedback from the teachers. It's been great to see letters come home from my kindergarten class and my third graders class about the OG practices that are being taught to the entire class, and to see my little kindergartner, tapping out words on her arms. That's been really heartening. And to hear other parents talk about spelling lists that make sense of a spelling list containing all OU vowel teams, and the multi-sensory way that the second grade class is going to be taught the spelling list. It's fantastic, rather than just being sent home a spelling list of 10 random words and your kid has to memorize them. So there's some really positive things happening. I also talked to a parent of a child in my son's school this week. They just had a private evaluation done, and he does have dyslexia. He'd been receiving LLI for 2 years and it hadn't worked. He'd been going backwards, and she was ready to go into school this week and fight for an IEP. And for the first time ever, I was able to say, you know what, unless the scores show that your son truly needs an IEP, just go in and listen to what the school has to say, because there's been some good things happening and they might have a good solution that doesn't involve an IEP. And sure enough, they had their meeting yesterday, and some really good solutions seem to have come out of that meeting, and the mother is not requesting an IEP, and it sounds like this kid's going to get services. I just wanted to say this would not have happened a year ago, because I was in that mother's place a year ago and we had to fight for an IEP. My son's been receiving Wilson for 4 months, and he's made more than a year's growth in 4 months on Wilson. So it worked out for us. I'm glad other parents don't have to fight for an IEP, but this is just a point school. So I ask that you consider very carefully any requests to expand these programs beyond the 7-point schools. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Karen Trout.
Hi. I want to say that over the last couple of years, we had 100 parents come and talk to you about their issues and problems around their kids with dyslexia. And I'm very glad to say that there's been some work happening in the district around literacy and around looking at what kids with dyslexia need. I feel that finally there is a crack in the door in changing the culture at BVSD. So thank you to everyone involved in starting that change. We still have a long way to go, and parents are working very hard, as are a lot of administrators and teachers. I want to talk about graduation rates and kids on IEPs. We have 3,500 kids in 2017 on IEPs, A third of them are there because of specific learning disabilities. And maybe 80% of those are kids with dyslexia. Now, they have a 74% graduation rates. I got a lot of this information from Core Request. So that doesn't have to happen. When kids are identified in kindergarten, when they get the correct intervention and they get enough of it, unfortunately, the ones at these point schools are getting that, it sounds like. Kids do not need to wait to fail to get onto an IEP. So wouldn't it be awesome if some of these numbers were reduced and the graduation rates for kids in special education were similar to their peers with a 91% graduation rate? I think we would save a lot of money. I know we're identifying more kids on IEPs. I don't know if that's because we're identifying their needs, and that's a good thing, or what the situation is around that. But anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, and that concludes our public participation. Thanks for coming and speaking to the board. Our next item is board communication. Who would like to begin this evening? Kathy.
I have a couple things to report. I went to the Fairview Coffee with the Principal that the principal holds every month, and the overriding concern still continues to be vaping amongst the students. The estimate was that as high as 40% of the students are vaping at Fairview, and they thought that might be low. There's a huge misunderstanding, even in the parents, that vaping is safe or not safe. And so tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, they're having a vaping information meeting at Fairview at 7 o'clock. So if anybody wants to learn more about it, there were some really heartfelt comments by parents whose kids are vaping and they don't know what to do because of the social pressure. So it's just a really, I'm sure it's not just limited to Fairview. So I just wanted to let people know about the meeting tomorrow night so that parents could become more aware of what the issue is and kind of the health implications of vaping, because they are potentially huge. It's really sad to think about 15 and 16-year-olds having to wear nicotine patches because at that age they've already become addicted to nicotine. So that was the main issue with the Fairview Coffee with the Principal. There are other issues, but I thought I would bring that one up. As Cindy mentioned in an email, I went to the fracking meeting at Pioneer, and I thought that was well attended, and the questions were really good. They had a good process in place for asking the questions, and I found the three presenters to be very factual and very helpful in trying to get information out to the community. So I just want to say thank you to Guillermo for setting that up, and to the parents for showing up, and for all of, we have a long way to go, I think, until we get that all figured out, but it was a really positive meeting. And then on Saturday afternoon, I went to our neighboring district to the St. Vrain Day of Excellence, and it's a really great event that I would like to see Boulder think about doing. A couple of the things that they did during the Day of Excellence is they had breakouts that were a day in the life of an elementary school, a day in the life of a middle school student, a day in the life of a high school student. They had programs, the way the agenda was laid out was clear and easy to follow. They had information on all of the different special populations, and then ended up with a conversation with the legislative representatives. So Mike Foote was there. And I'm forgetting his name, who was the prior social worker, you'll know who I mean, from Longmont, was the other representative. And I just think that, Jonathan Singer, thank you. I just like that whole day of holding out the good work that schools are doing. I like the way it's entitled A Day of Excellence. So I just put that out there because I think if it hadn't been held on the same day as the Women's March, they might have had a little higher attendance, but it was still pretty well attended. And at some point, I'd just like to see if the district and the board has any interest in looking at something like that, because I think it's a really nice, positive thing to do for our community. And as some of you may know, they have Leadership St. Vrain, which takes a fairly large time commitment. So what's nice about this is it's just a Saturday. So it doesn't involve a lot of commitment, but it's a way to engage parents and help them understand what's going on in the schools. So that's all.
Okay, anybody else? Kitty?
Yeah, I forgot to say this last week, but in December, I was at Flatirons Crossing Mall and ran into a whole bunch of middle schoolers there with some teachers, and so I stopped to talk to them. And they were, and I can't remember which school it was. It was either, I think it was Casey or Centennial, but anyway, it was the entire music program, and they were out in the community doing performances. And I just think it's great that when we see our kids out in the community giving back and, you know, showing the community what great kids we have.
Anyone else? Shelley?
Yes, I want to thank everyone for speaking, but thanks especially to the people who came to talk about Lakeshore Estates. We're going to be discussing that later in the meeting. And I happen to agree that we need to slow that process down until we're on better footing in terms of whether that was a dedication or not, and how the community feels about that. And I also want to thank Karen for coming forward around dyslexia. I'm glad to hear that we've made some progress. I know there's a lot more to go, but thank you so much to you and your group for your persistence and for helping to educate all of us about dyslexia. Thank you.
Just real quick, I often walk through the property we're discussing tonight with my dogs, and also to comment on the progress we're making on the students that have those reading needs and are diagnosed specifically with dyslexia. I read a study from CDE, I think it was yesterday, saying there was a huge correlation between 6th grade standardized test scores and those kiddos when they get to high school needing remedial help to get into college classes. And I think we could prevent that by focusing earlier with these students.
Yeah, I want to thank all the speakers too tonight, so thank you very much. The students that spoke here, I really appreciate what they're saying in terms of what they're doing in their own schools. I was reading Chalkbeat, where South High School has this peer mentoring program, and what that has done, it has increased significantly the number of kids of color that are in AP classes. I'm not sure how they're doing it, but I think it's something that maybe we should start looking into, seeing what we can do to increase our numbers of minority students and low-income students around taking AP classes.
Okay, thank you. And one thought, when we share ideas like Kathy's idea for the Day of Excellence and the idea of looking at mentors and, you know, AP classes, is it might make sense to send an email or bring it up again at agenda setting so that we can remember to track those good ideas and keep them circulating. Okay, so our next item is are our action items. And are there any, sorry, let me read the list of items first. We have 8.1 personnel items, 8.2 approval of minutes, January 9th, 2018 special meeting, 8.3 approval of minutes, January 9th, 2018 regular meeting, 8.4 approval of minutes, January 16th, 2018 special meeting, 8.5 acceptance of donation El Dorado K through 8, 8.6 acceptance of donation food services, 8.7 acceptance of donation Southern Hills Middle School, 8.8 approval of policy IG instructional material selection and adoption, 8.9 board policy CBA CBC qualifications, powers, and responsibilities of superintendent, 8.10 contract for real estate services, 8.11 resolution 18-01 respectable workplace commitment. Are there any items board members would like to pull from the consent grouping? Yeah, Shelley.
I would like to pull 8.8 and 8.10.
8.10.
8.10, yeah.
8.10, okay. So 8.8 and 8.10. Any other items board members would like to pull? Okay. Items 8.8 and 8.10 are pulled from consent grouping. And first, we need a motion to approve the remaining items on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Okay, and a second? Kathy? Lori, will you please call the roll on consent grouping?
Benford.
Yes.
Fuqua is not present. Garcia.
Yes.
Gebhardt.
Yes.
Marquis.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Sargent.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. So first, we'll start with 8.8, approval of policy IG instructional materials selection and adoption. Would the board member like to discuss the reason?
Yes, I'm trying to find my notes on that. Yeah, I felt like the language we ended up with was a little confusing in the second paragraph. I believe you know what line I'm referencing. It says the final decision on selection, approval, and purchase shall rest with the superintendent or designee and is subject to the approval of selection and purchase by the board. I just think that sentence is a little awkward, and so I'm recommending that we use the CASB language, that instead of that sentence, it would say final decision on purchase shall rest with the superintendent or designee, subject to approval by the board. I think that says the same thing and a little more concisely. So I would recommend changing that sentence.
Okay.
So-
Any, whoops, do I need a motion now? Whoops. Oh, and first, can I get a motion just to approve 8.8? Thank you, Richard. Second, Kitty. Okay. Okay, let's, and do you want to, and do you need to make a motion that reads the exact language, Shelley?
I think I do.
Yep.
So I move that the second paragraph of the proposed policy IJ be changed from, quote, the final decision on selection, approval, and purchase shall rest with the superintendent or designee and is subject to the approval of the selection and purchase by the board. 2, final decision on purchase shall rest with the superintendent or designee subject to approval by the board.
Laura, were you able to get that?
Shelley, can you send that to me or do you have it?
Yes, I can. I can.
Okay, and Richard, are you seconding
You
it?
need to write the second.
Okay.
Would
And
you
that's
like to
seconded by
take my
Richard. Okay, any discussion? Kathy?
I have a question.
Yep.
So I'm going to change this stuff in yellow to this stuff in, okay.
So Shelley, why did you take out the word selection?
I thought it was implied already in that statement.
Because to me, purchase
She
and
just took it
selection
away
are-
from me, so I can't look at what it said.
Purchase and selection to me seem like different processes.
They
And
are.
So I didn't know why you took the selection language out, because that seems like it was part of the role of the superintendent and the board.
Well, we don't select. I mean, usually staff selects and we look at it, and if we don't like the selection, we say we don't like that selection, but we don't actually select. So
But, so I just wasn't clear why you took out our approval of the selection and the superintendent's decision on selection, why you took that out.
thank you. Well, I think that's why Donna changed it, to make sure that it was in there, right, Donna?
I suggested the wording because I thought when I read the CRS 22 Colorado Revised Statutes, I realized that the board's responsibility is to prescribe the curriculum and textbooks. And that it all gets caught up in wordsmithing, and I thought I wanted community, for anyone reading this, to realize selection and purchase were part of what we are approving, but I can go either way.
Well,
because by default, I think that when you do approve the purchase, you're kind of approving it all. So if we wanted to condense the wording, I could go either way.
The part I thought with the new wording, because I'm just thinking about these literacy materials that were selected are now available for review and will be approved on by the board. I think that Shelley's language in, or the CASB model's language that Shelley's recommending kind of reflects what our role is in this. So we don't come in until the end when we approve it, and that's just the last step. But again, I don't think our process is going to change regardless of the words we choose. I think we're going to stick with this process whereby we are not going out and shopping for materials, so.
Having said all that, I think Kathy makes a good point, and it would be a very simple thing to insert into what I've just suggested, final decision on selection and purchase, and keep that line still very clear. I think that would be just fine. Yeah.
I think approval is redundant, but I think selection's a separate process, and it refers to the superintendent's role as well, so that's all.
Yeah, I think that's easy to add, yeah.
When I first read this, the new language, it felt really redundant to me because we talk about selection in the previous sentence. Materials for classrooms shall be selected by the appropriate professional personnel in consultation. So to me, it's clearer just to leave it the way it was, use the CASB language, final decision on purchase, having already been selected in the previous sentence, shall rest with the superintendent or designee and is subject to approval of the board.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Really quickly, I don't want to wordsmith this to death, but I think they're different.
They are, I think they are.
The first sentence and the second sentence refer to different people and different processes, because the second one talks about the final decision for the superintendent. So to me, the first sentence says it can be selected by a committee, and then the final decision is made by the superintendent and approved by us. So I think they're different, that's all.
Richard, any comments? Nope, you're good? All right. Shelley?
So Kathy, are you good with final decision on selection and purchase? Okay, so that would be a revision then, Laura?
So do we need?
I need to make a motion, I think.
Yeah, I think you need to move to amend.
But we have to move to.
We had Richard. Richard seconded it.
Richard seconded.
Oh. Is Shelley making a move to
I
amend?
can withdraw my motion, and now Kathy can make a new motion, or I can make a new motion. Yes, yeah. So I move that the second sentence be changed to final decision on selection and purchase shall rest with the superintendent or designee, subject to approval by the board.
Okay. Do we have a second? Okay, second by Kitty. Okay, and can we call that to a vote then? All right, Laura, would you call that to a vote when you have a second?
Okay, the motion on the table is to revise the second paragraph of policy IJ so that the sentence that begins the final decision will be modified to read, final decision on final decision on selection and purchase shall rest with the superintendent or designee, subject to approval by the board. Benford.
Yes.
Fuqua is not present. Garcia.
Yes.
Gebhardt. Yes. Marquis. Yes. Myers. Yes. Sargent.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, and do we need a motion? Okay. Do you want to call the roll on that then?
This is the motion to approve the amended policy. Benford.
Yes.
Fuqua is not present. Garcia.
Yes.
Gebhardt. Yes. Myers. Yes. Or Marquis. Yes. Sargent.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, next we're going to look at 8.10, contract for real estate services. And we need a motion to approve. Okay. And Shelley, do you want to discuss?
Yeah. So I pulled this again because since the last time we talked about this, I've done a lot of research and talked to a lot of people, and think I have enough new information that it makes sense for us to delay this until we understand it. So I'm happy to go into what I discovered, not in massive detail or anything, if it would be helpful. But I would just say that, 2 weeks ago, the board was asked to vote on this contract with this real estate brokerage firm to sell the Lakeshore Estates property. And at that meeting, there was a question about whether the land was dedicated to BVSD or not. And when land is dedicated to a school district, it doesn't mean you can't sell it, but it does mean that you have to go through certain steps to sell it. And so I wanted to just be clear, because it was unclear to me whether it was dedicated or not. So I asked for more information from our attorneys, and I did a lot of my own research. And what I found was that it looks to me like a fair portion, if not all of it, was dedicated. And so what that then means is that we have to go through a process outlined by the Boulder County Land Use Code, which includes obtaining approval from both the County Planning Commission and Parks and Open Space Advisory Committee. So we can't actually make a motion and approve it to sell this property without going through that process first. So, and there also appears to be an issue with the current land use designation of that property, which precludes selling it for housing right now. So, as you know, I sent you an email, and I'm sorry it came later than I wanted. It took a ton of time to do the research that I did. It took a ton of time to scan the documents, a lot more than I thought it would. But I think there's a clear enough documentation there for us just to take a little more time, that this is premature to do this right now until we've had a chance to review that material, and I know you guys haven't had a chance to because I just sent it. So if we're in agreement, though, after you look at those materials, that at least a portion of this land has been dedicated, then we really do need to follow the Boulder Land Use Code before we dispose of it. So I am moving that we postpone this until everyone is very, very clear about what we're about to do. And I also agree that we should have some much more community input on this than we have.
Questions, discussion, board members?
I mean, I appreciate all the work you're doing on this, Shelley. And, as you said, we didn't have enough time to look through all of it, but I'm curious what you found that the attorneys did not have access to.
I'm not sure. I mean, it was all public record, and it was all conversations with people at the county land use office and the clerk and recorder's office. So I assume everyone, I didn't have anything anybody else couldn't have had.
So, yeah, just interesting to me that you came to a different conclusion if you had the same materials than the attorneys did.
Well, I think that's why it's worth talking about this some more to get to the bottom of it.
Ms. Marcus, would you like the staff to talk to you about what they've discovered?
Would they? Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I want to say some comments.
Here they come.
Yeah. And I know it is tricky. We got this very late, so I myself did not have time to explore Shelley's email. So.
I'm sorry, are there any specific questions, or is that where to start?
I don't have any questions.
Well, the question, I think, is there's a discrepancy in information that's been provided to the board on whether the land was deeded or not.
Well, the first thing that we got was an opinion from Dick Bump, and I don't think he included all of the documents in his assessment. I think he relied mostly on two documents that demonstrated that mentioned that there was a sale for the properties, and he also talked about the tax stamps. So that's what the two things that opinion was based on. There was more information, but he chose not to go into it because he thought that was enough. It was convincing enough.
Okay. Any other questions?
Cindy, you said they had additional information?
We had, I believe you all worked with legal counsel, and legal counsel felt that the land could be sold. There was not a question.
No, there was not a question.
There was not a question. And Shelley, you're bringing up a question, so we obviously have a difference in information. Because what our information said was we could sell the property.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and Glenn just said that they relied on very few documents to make that decision, and I'm offering you over a dozen that suggests that that is not the case.
The legal assessment, he's seen those documents. He just he cut to the chase and gave what he thought was necessary to make his argument. So that's what's included in his document. He does
cut
have
to the
the
chase.
other.
I think that he used what he thought would be helpful in making his
Would be
case. And I'm
sufficient.
saying there's more information out there that may prove otherwise. And I've offered that to everyone to review.
It's our understanding that all the documentation's been reviewed, there's been a legal analysis, and the legal opinion has been issued. And so that's from the staff's point of view and reviewing the documents. Some of them that you provided were before all of the documents that led to the legal conclusion.
Right, but that does not make them part of a conclusion that we should, not part of a conclusion that we should be coming to here, just because.
Relied on as part of drawing a conclusion, all the documentation.
Well, I think it's worth taking some time to read what I came up with. I literally spent my entire, practically 2 weeks doing this, and talked to experts at the land use office and the clerks and recorder's office, and they happen to have supported what I'm finding and agree with me. So I don't think it's enough to say that the legal opinion is this and therefore we need to accept it when we have other experts who are saying no, that is not the case.
Melissa, could you repeat what you just said in terms of review of the documents and the process that we've gone through? Could you repeat that, please?
So we do have a legal opinion that provides the basis for the board's ability to move forward with this contract. We own the land through a fee simple. We have the deeds for that. Our outside legal counsel, who's a real estate expert, has reviewed all of the available documentation and arrived at this conclusion.
And I do appreciate, I want to trust, but I really want to take the time to verify that we're making the right decision. And I know that a community member this week sent me different information regarding the value of the property, almost double of what we've been told that it is valued at. And so that led me to think, is there more information that I need to have in order to make a wise decision?
Yep.
Well, in response to what you just said, Donna, I think that's why we would hire a real estate consultant, because we don't know what the value is. So, well, it was an old one. We weren't given a value. It was from a couple of years ago. So my memory is that they said that's part of the reason for hiring the consultant was to get a current estimate of the value. So, but what I worry about, and Shelley, I just skimmed your memo because as you said, you got it to us really late today, is there's lots of mays and possiblies, and you just said may. I'm uncomfortable that we would rely on a decision that somebody in some office told us something different when our council has gone through an exhaustive study. And so I'm just curious how we come to some conclusion on this. I don't want to make the wrong decision for sure, but at some point I have to trust that the right research and conclusions were done instead of independent kind of, hate to use a technical term, hearsay. Somebody told me that this was the way it was, because you don't know what information was given to them and why they were making that conclusion. So I don't really know. I guess I'm looking to Tina and Cindy for what we could do.
I'm wondering if, and maybe this is a question for Melissa, can we take Shelley's email and send it over to get a response back from the legal department specifically? And I do appreciate all the work that's been done by our legal team. And I realize that this is a legal opinion, but there's a significant email that Shelley sent that I'm actually not really familiar with, but maybe we can just get a reaction to that from legal counsel via email and then put it back on the agenda in 2 weeks, if that's okay with everyone. Richard. Okay. Do you want to call the roll?
What are you voting on?
We're voting to table this.
Okay, you're voting to table.
Not table, to postpone, sorry.
Postpone.
For 2 weeks. Mhm.
So just before we go there, during that 2 weeks, what's going to happen?
So we would send the email that you provided us to the legal counsel to
Okay.
react to and to understand why are the discrepancies there.
Okay.
So that we can have a good understanding of what's going on.
Okay.
And if we need to go through the other process, that's great, we can do that, and if not, we'll go proceed with the.
Okay, so my only question about that motion then is, first of all, there's no rush to do this. And so by the time legal counsel has time to review this and come back with their points, and then I have time to respond to that, it could take longer than 2 weeks. So I'm
It
not
could.
sure why we would put a 2-week limit on this process.
I would prefer to keep it going, though, because we've already been dealing with this for 6 weeks, and so I don't want it to be a 12-month process, ideally. So if we could just set it for 2 weeks, and it turns out we can't work within those timelines, we can just keep kicking it down.
Okay, I just don't want to be in a position where I have to respond within 8 hours and I can't do that, so.
Just one more question on looking at 25 documents. It's going to take a while. And I've scanned through a few, trying to pull up the ones that I didn't get to look at before. But my question is, in all of this research did you talk to any other legal counsel within the land use department?
No.
Okay.
So it sounds to me like we have two different things we're talking about. One is whether or not it's been dedicated and can we just sell it and enter into this agreement. And the other one is listening to the community. And I think those, should be two separate things. I mean, I don't think we want to say, once we get the legal discussion, then we're just going to do it. If we decide we want to listen to community, which I think is a good idea, we ought to set a process up for doing that.
My this is a personal opinion, we can talk about this too, is that the land was declared surplus 3 years ago, and it's been known in the community for that period of time, and we've already tried to sell it once. So it's not a new concept. Now, that doesn't mean that times haven't changed, and we certainly have seen in Boulder a lot of issues with communities and open land and the fear about land use, and I appreciate it and have a lot of empathy for it. But the only thing I would rather our board not do is starting to try to sell surplus property with a lot of contingencies on it that we can't really control because we would never develop this property. We would simply sell it. But that being said, I think we've already gone to open space. From what I recall, open space is not interested in the property, which is an issue, so that probably would have been an ideal outcome, I would imagine. Yep, and so I do think we need to continue down the process because it's already been declared surplus, so.
I think when that was declared surplus, and I believe there was, I don't remember if it was on consent during a board meeting or what it was, but I know we did not have this conversation about it being a dedication or not, at least not in any great detail. And for 55 years, this district has called it a dedication. This very district has called it a dedication. So like I said, it doesn't mean you can't sell it. It just means you have to go through a process that's spelled out.
And I'm absolutely open. I think we're open to having a reaction from this and then looking at it, and then we'll see what the timeline looks like.
So
That seems fair.
can I just clarify? One is the dedication question. The second question is, do you want to sell the property? But first is the dedication issue. So you would like more information on the dedication issue from our legal counsel, and then you have to make a decision about whether you want to sell the property or not.
There's also, Cindy, a question about the land use designation.
Okay.
Because if we're going to
Land
sell the
use.
property, it needs to be able to be used for housing if that's what we're going to sell it for, and right now it's not zoned for that.
Okay. Thank you.
I think we can call the roll on the motion to postpone. Is that correct? For 2 weeks.
Till the next board meeting. Okay. The motion on the table is to postpone the contract for real estate services to the next board meeting. Benford,
Yes.
Fuqua is not present. Garcia,
Yes.
Gebhardt, Marquis, Myers, Sergeant.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, and at this point, I would like there to be a 5-minute break. Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order, and we'll move on to our action items, starting with the 2017-2018 revised budget. And Mr. Sutter.
I have a brief 6-slide presentation to go through
Okay.
and describe the changes. So this brief presentation references the changes since the last board meeting and the revised budget study item. So everything that was presented at that last meeting is included, plus the following items. In the general operating fund, we added 2 one-time expenditures, $411,000 for career and technical education equipment. That a lot of it is related to the presentation at the work session, I believe that was last week, and the details and the plans to move forward with the CTE program. And $250,000 for an ERP, that's Enterprise Resource Planning System, RFP, Request for Proposal Development and Processing. This is an estimate for an outside consultant to help with the process of going through both the development of and implementation of an RFP. It's a fairly big process to do that for the systems that run all the business of the district. Next, in the Operations and Technology Fund, we have an increase in the expenditures of just under $2.5 million to the ERP implementation line item, which brings that total to $4 million. This is an amount that's in line with recent RFPs and proposals in Colorado, and an RFP will bring focus and clarity to the path ahead for the district relative to its ERP system. The ending balance is reduced and is now a 0 ending balance within that fund. Next, within the charter funds, the charter boards adopt their budgets, and these are just changes that align with those changes adopted by their boards, shifts between ending fund balance and expenditures, so nothing significant overall, but I just wanted to note that there were some changes there. Here's a summary of the general operating fund. There's a slight rounding and a couple of line item totals here. The schedule summarizes the total changes from the budget adopted in June. The current ending balance of $3.2 million sets the stage for the 2018-19 budget development as we work through that process. And finally, the summary slide for the Operations and Technology Fund. As the change previously noted for the ERP system implementation. This creates a set-aside. This will not actually be expended in the current year, but it allows district staff to move forward with an appropriate amount within that line item. The end.
Okay, board members, what questions or clarifying questions do you all have? Donna?
I have a couple on, last week when we had the session and CTE gave their presentation, and if I remember correctly, and I could have this wrong, we were asking Dr. Bludorn, so what are you asking of the board? And she said, I'm not asking for anything. And then you said, well, the $411,000 for CTE equipment, so I'm confused.
I don't remember specifically not saying, Joan saying that she wasn't asking for anything. The realignment of the program, these funds are one-time expenditures for equipment to bring a couple of the programs up to a point where they can actually grant a certificate. Some of the equipment does not allow them to do that, so this allows that to happen. The ability to operate some of the programs next year really necessitates the investment of these funds at this point in time. This is equipment and that kind of expense. So it's a one-time expense. It's not expanding the program.
So so if they need this money, and I really appreciated the presentation and very much support that program. I just want to say that. But I'm unclear about this too, because, so a week ago, we didn't know that they needed this to complete certification for their program. This is brand new. This is the first time we've seen this.
I'm wondering if Mark can help us with this. Mark, do you have information that can help us with this question?
Like, why this minute and not the last time we looked at these numbers?
So when we brought our proposal for the program to you last week, it really was an overview of what we were doing through our visioning. And so we were seeking your approval of those programs. The costs that are associated are one-time, so they're material costs ranging from Project Lead the Way to automotive to construction. These all have costs in order to run the programs. We're trying to capture the costs from our current budget, but these are one-time costs. I mean, this is what it would cost to run these programs. And again, this was from our visioning that literally just concluded at the end of last month.
Are you not done?
Just, thank you. I mean, unrelated to that, there are other one-time costs that we have discussed repeatedly before this.
For
other
CTE or
no,
for
other things.
Sure.
So other efforts that we would like to see happen. So
Understood.
I'm just surprised that this came in and displaced all those other discussions.
Mhm.
So.
That's not how I remember the conversation last week, but I just want to ask, as part of our new graduation guidelines, being able to get industry certificates is a key part of it. And if these programs aren't up to snuff, these students can't get those industry certificates, and therefore they're foreclosed on doing one
Right.
of our, right? So it's really important for these students who are doing our graduation guidelines that they get, that these programs be up to snuff. And the reason I know this is that my son was in the auto program, and he couldn't do it. We can't have the competitions here. He can't do the industry certificates. He can't do any of that. It's not that to mean he didn't learn good skills, but if we don't bring them up to snuff, then that whole pathway is foreclosed. Is that a fair statement?
That's a correct statement. We're unable to run the programs without these expenditures.
So I appreciate that, and like I said, I very much support the CTE program, but it's also true that dyslexia screeners are one-time costs, and if we don't identify those kids, they could end up behind, not reading for the rest of their lives up to their peer levels. There are many other things that we've been talking about literally for years that we could spend this money on as well. And I'm just not sure I understand the process where we can talk about one thing for years and not get it in the budget, and then something comes up and a week later we never even knew about it, and a week later it's actually in the budget and we're ready to approve it tonight. That just seems to me that there's something wrong with the process, not something wrong with CTE's request.
Donna, did you want to go back to other questions?
And back to my concern with Jonas, I wanted to be able to support them. That's why I asked that specific question, what do you need? So I wasn't asking for anything. So it'd be interesting to find out, maybe I misinterpreted it, but I do think it's important to support our kiddos with those CTE certificates. I also know that there's a prerequisite of a reading requirement to get into the program, so we need to focus on that as well. I had a couple of other questions to ask, and Bill, I apologize if this is redundant. Maybe we asked it before, but on the general operating fund and then the operations and technology fund, there was 3.2 million, 3.2 ending fund balance, and then the 2.5. Where's that 700K go? The difference
in the
there?
general fund, that's the additional expenditures that I noted, the 400,000 for CTE and 250 and the reserves.
Okay, I got that one. And so then are we gonna, are you saying that we will spend 250,000 on someone to write the RFP? Is that the way I understand that?
There would be a process to select somebody to assist with that process. It is, as I mentioned, the organization, the Government Finance Officers Association, does this regularly for municipalities. Matter of fact, Boulder County use them for this process. And they assist in generating requirements and sort of doing the entire process for an RFP. And since it's a relatively large expenditure, it's a good practice to have experts in the field help with that process.
Okay, it's helping me get a good grasp on this. The last thing is, I think, Cindy, I sent to you, I know it was late because I got all of this late and looking through it. It could be just a typo. On the general operating fund, we'll be using 13,059, and then there's those, and it looks like there was a little bit of an error in the addition. Do you have that email?
So,
Yes, we did, and Bill has it.
Okay.
So the math that identifies that you are using fund balance, which is what are your total uses minus or what is your total revenue minus your total uses, and then adding back in one-time expenditures, and that needs to be at least 0 or a positive number. So we have identified more one-time uses than we had to, but they're one-time projects, so they just add up to more than what the math works out for the fund balance shift.
Okay, and then just the last question for me is that with these surplus, is that what, in the future, are we talking about holding on to that or using it for other possibilities within the priorities that the board may have or community?
So I would suggest that allows to go into the 18-19 budget development process with a dollar amount in mind. We will go through the mid-year analysis, the second quarter financials, and the mid-year analysis. We review that in February with the board at a work session. February 20th at noon, I believe, is the time. That's where we do our projection to the year end, and whether revenues and expenditures are coming in okay. So again, it allows something for resources available to discuss for the next year's budget. There is the efficiency of implementation and timing of activities and decisions that need to be made at certain times to get things in the door. I mean, this CTE, there's no question that it might seem sudden. We have had conversations about this internally for a few months now of what are the needs and wanting that visioning process to be sort of completed before working on the expenditure side of it. So the timing was slightly off. It would have been better if the visioning had been done months ago, but that's how it worked out.
Kathy?
Can you give the Reader's Digest version of where we are in the ERP? I seem to have lost my way. I thought we'd approved it, and now we're approving what seems to me like a really large amount for somebody to write an RFP, and I don't need detail, I just would like an overview to remind me of where we are in that.
So what we would do is go through an RFP process to find a consulting firm, whether it's GFOA or some other equivalent, to do the RFP process.
When we passed the operational mill levy, that money was supposed to go to the ERP, the first dollars in that. So can you start from there and take us to where, because I thought those dollars were already spoken for, and now I'm just trying to track that. So if you could start back with that and just bring us to where we are now, that I think, especially since we have some new board members, and my memory apparently isn't very good on this, so thank you.
So the original plan was to move forward with an upgrade of our current ERP system, and that was why those resources were put in place at this time last year. As we moved through the summer and into the fall, conversations began to come up of going out for an ERP, a full ERP to replace our ERP system, full RFP. This is very terminology confusing. A full RFP to replace our ERP system. And just in the last couple of months, there have been some completed RFPs locally and some other proposals that would suggest that we were a little light on the 1.5 million original amount to do either an upgrade or a full RFP. So this gets more in line with an amount that would be reasonable for that. It's big dollar amounts to, and a lot of time and a lot of effort to go through a ERP system. And this is payroll. This is 90% of our expenditures, so it's a big deal.
And I want to add, Kathy, we've had, I'm not sure, probably 500,000 meetings about this very topic because it's very complex. And we've really come down to saying an RFP allows us to say, do we stay with our current system, but it will be a major upgrade even with our current system, or do we do what we're seeing many other school districts do, which is currently the big seller seems to be Workday, but that is not an ad. I don't have an opinion on this. So we really feel pretty strongly that we need some support in looking at, because we're talking about the future. It's not like we're going to do a system and then do another system. This is multi-years. So given the advancement in the field and given that staff has spent a long time looking at this, we really feel like it's a good idea at this point to do an RFP and really look at the available systems. We might upgrade, but even an upgrade, it's no longer $1 million. It's way more than $1 million. Or we may go with a new system, which will also be more than $1 million. And we've got Bill who's keeping us honest about cost and really looking at it. But between technology and budget and HR, let's see, 500,000 meetings?
3/4.
It's a major effort.
No,
It's a major
I
project.
understand that. How did we come up with $250,000 just to pull together an RFP? That just seems really expensive.
Boulder County spent $230,000.
Okay, but
It's the ballpark of the amount. I mean, we'll go through a process to find out what the real amount is, and
Okay.
Won't spend whatever we won't spend. But that's the what other school districts have spent to do that, and our neighbors.
and the $1 million is now just parked. We didn't ever spend it.
Correct.
So, Bill, given that many municipalities and school districts are moving towards this or have moved towards it, was there any opportunity to use one of those cooperative purchasing agreements to look at this? I know we've done that in the past.
Cooperative purchasing agreements it's kind of like a cooperative purchasing agreement for building a school. It's kind of a unique structure. What do you need for your district? The RFP will be tailored for the school district. So it's not something that is as easy to do off the shelf for a cooperative agreement like our copier contract or buying paper or things like that.
Because we do payroll differently than other school districts? Or like, what's different about our district?
It's Boulder. There aren't, that I know of, there are not cooperative contracts for big ERP systems like this.
It would be very difficult. School districts are unique in many of the ways they do things. And yes, part of the product is you have to adopt the product, but products also can't say the word, create a custom module for you if you need them. So it's a major effort. So, go ahead.
The timing for getting the RFP and
We have a meeting at the end of February internally to start that process.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I really understand this, because I don't really understand it. I know I don't, so just help me through this. I know in 2017-18, when we did the same beginning fund balance resolution, right? We do that every year. We said that the Operations and Technology Fund will be using $1.342 million of the beginning fund balance for an identified project related to a required ERP system upgrade and will not lead to an ongoing deficit. So is that, obviously that number's not right anymore, right? But are we saying that this is not gonna lead us to an ongoing deficit? Like,
Correct.
we're putting more money into it now,
Right.
right? Are we gonna be putting more money into it indefinitely?
So that's why go through the RFP process, get all the responses back, and find out what the implementation costs are separate. Those are one-time expenses, whether it's upgrade or implementation. And then we currently have an ongoing, the contract was just approved, I think back in October, an ongoing expense for the system that we have. And so whatever new
Right.
system or same system would match up against those expenses.
Right, so right now, it's Infor, right?
Yes.
And we have a contract with them for about $550,000 a year. That's right? So you already asked us to approve an extension through 2019. So what does this mean for that?
We can cancel that contract when we need to. There's language in there to cancel it. It was a 3-year contract, but there is termination language within it.
So we would terminate that contract and we would enter into a new contract with a new provider.
We would keep the system going and paying everybody until we had a new system up and running.
Okay. And then just to be clear, I think Kathy just confirmed this, but so in December, I think 2 years ago, you guys presented that you were gonna use part of the operational mill levy for the info system, the Infor ERP system, and that was at $1.5 million, right? So we have not used that? Is that what you're saying? We've
Correct.
only used the ongoing contract money.
Correct.
For the parts, okay. So I think what I'd like to say about this is that this is a lot of money, this whole entire system, and I would appreciate a work session on this, where we just understand what the system does, when's the end to this amount of money that we're spending on the ERP system, and what is it going to replace here in the district? What offsetting cost savings are there? I just don't understand any of that. So I would really appreciate somehow, we'll have to figure out the process if we are in agreement, but somehow approving a revised budget because we have to, but not letting any money be spent on this until we understand it. That would be my request, however that has to happen.
So I have a question. So the RFP, so right now it looks to me like the 4 million is a placeholder that's contingent on what happens after the RFP is developed and the process has gone through. Is that correct?
Correct.
So that, will there be another point for the board to say, is there a way to interject the board into this where you do the RFP and then we meet to see what it is? Because I think I'm saying something similar to what Shelley's saying. And Kathy, I'm interested in what the ongoing cost implication is. I know we have one-time money right now, so I'm not as concerned about that, but the ongoing cost is what I want to make sure that I know what we're committing to over time, because these contracts tend to be 3 or 5 years. Is there a way to get visibility into that, or how is that? And I don't want to micromanage this. That's not my goal. I want, but it is that if it's a large ongoing cost, it's a lot of money.
So the two places that would occur would be the RFP for the RFP support. So that first $250,000 would go out for an RFP and say we need help doing this and get those responses back. And assuming the contract was more than $100,000, which it likely will be, that would come back to the board at that point in time with that proposal, whatever that is. Then we would go through the process. And then at the end of the RFP, there's hopefully some selection been made, and then that would come forward to the board with, here's what the proposed implementation is, here's what the ongoing contract costs of it are. Most the big companies that we're working, that are sort of in our wheelhouse, are in that more SaaS model, right? They're cloud hosted and all that. So there's not server costs that when we first implemented back in 2004, There were servers and equipment and all that kind of stuff that was part of the expense. Now that's all just packaged up in the annual maintenance fee. So at that,
One of the things to remember is that the system will need a new system. One way or another, we need a new ERP system. So going out for an RFP is the responsible thing to do fiscally, to see what can we learn. And we may discover that we want to stay with our system, but that system is going through a major upgrade. It won't be the system we have anymore. It will be a more expensive upgraded system. Or we may discover that we want to go with a whole new system. But one way or another, you have to have a new ERP system. You can't run a system without your ERP system. That's your payroll, that's your bill paying, that's your HR system. So we will need a new system. And that, I understand looking at the costs are a bit traumatic, but it's going to have to be done.
Are we penalized, backing up to what you said earlier, for terminating any, okay.
we made sure that language was in the contract.
So what you're asking us to approve is up to $250,000 to do the RFP. So, right, and you'll come back and tell us what that cost would be when you issue the RFP. And then maybe to Shelley's point, after we have the information from the RFP, I think it would be really helpful to get more information about what the options are. Because we keep hearing, I mean, we knew we needed a new one. That's never been a discussion, but now, I always thought we were just upgrading, and now we're looking at new stuff. So I think more information would be really helpful, and it's just at what point it makes sense.
Well, I think all that's right, but I think they're asking us to approve more than that. If you look at the last page that Bill had up there, they're asking for a $2.5 million increase from what they asked for the last time they asked it. So it's not just the $250,000, it's up to $4 million now. And that's a lot of money when I'd like to know what we're saving as a result of this. What's going away? You know, what are the offsets to that? Because I assume there's efficiencies, there's other programs that we're not using anymore that we're paying licensing fees for. I'd just like to understand the whole cost picture, the whole efficiency picture, you know, exactly why we're doing this. Because my fear is that just like I'm looking back here to 2017, 18, if I'm in 2019 and 20 and looking back and we're looking for a new ERP system because this one didn't do it, you know, or we changed our mind, like, you know, that's what we're doing this year. So I don't want that to happen again. I'd just like to understand it better. So that's my request.
Would you like to hear from Andrew? He's our technology person, and we spend a lot of time together.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I think
don't know
a
if
work
Andrew could-
session, I don't know
sorry,
if we
what,
can
Tina?
have all the answers question, right? I mean, I think it's great that we have a better understanding that the 250 is going to lead to something that might go as high as 4 million.
Okay.
But then a work session that's separate, that gives us a better landscape. And we haven't really done that recently, a good technology, internal technology type of work session. So I think maybe doing that is a good idea as well.
Okay.
But what happens to the approval in the meantime is my question. Like, can we
So
see
I'm
it?
comfortable approving it now that I know that it's more of a placeholder and that we'll see what happens. So
We can change this up until June 30th, right? We can change the budget. So if we find out, RFP comes back and we find out that we want to do something different, or the program's going to cost more, or anything that could come out of an RFP, we could say, we're not comfortable with this, we're going to take this out of the budget, the revised budget, and no money will have been spent up until that time. We
Until
can
you
safely say
authorize
it.
the contract, there's no money expended. So it'll be the response to the RFP that'll have all those details.
Yep, and I think Bill's done a great job kind of outlining this. The only thing I'd add is that we've got to look at this from a value proposition. We may pay more for another system, but if you gain the efficiencies that you're referring to, Shelley, then it could offset that. And that's, an RFP will help us understand. It could be we stay with Infor at the end of the day. It could be we move to a different system.
So that is, I mean, that is something they'll be looking at, whether we're better
Absolutely.
off staying with our program that we have now.
But we
Absolutely.
still have to upgrade. Remember, it's
Right.
not the system we currently have, it's the upgrade of the system. So whether we stay with this, with Infor, it's the upgrade, or whether we go to a different system. So, you know, and I don't think these are easy questions, but one way or another, it will be different.
It
So
will
did
be.
our contract with them include upgrades?
Yes.
Okay, so we're not paying for an additional upgrade if we stay with N4.
That's right. I think what you have to look at, though, is Infor 10, which we're on today, is basically 1990s technology. Infor 11 is more modern-day SaaS technology, and that's a big leap.
But we don't get that with the contract.
We
That-
actually do
we
get to
do
pay
get it.
for the new one, but it's that transitionary cost. And then you have to ask yourself, is Infor 11 the right application? You know, comparatively, District 20 just went through this process. Last Thursday, they just approved Workday as their new system. Infor and Workday were the top two after 12 different companies applied. So why they went to Workday, we haven't had time to sit down and say, you know, why did you go that way?
So N4 could still be in the running.
Absolutely.
And the upgrade could have already been paid for in our contract.
No.
No,
Okay.
no. We will have to pay for the upgrade.
That's what I thought you just said.
No, an upgrade is, it's transitioning systems, it's
Do you know what that upgrade would cost for N4?
No, we don't. The only way to know that for sure is to do an RFP.
Okay.
And we are assuming that Infor will respond to the RFP. We are assuming that Workday will respond. We are assuming other companies may respond. And then we go through them and say, what seems like the logical decision for Boulder Valley?
I didn't think that the companies were responding. I thought we were trying to find somebody who will do the RFP to identify the strengths and
She's
weaknesses.
step
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's step one. Yes, thank you, Kathy.
Good questions.
Okay, so that was a lot. Any other remarks about the RFP for the ERP?
ASAP.
Anyone? Okay, what about other budget questions? Any budget questions? You good, Kitty?
So I have a question, yeah. So I didn't really have a lot of time to read through all your responses to our budget questions, but I did skim them. And one of the things I saw was Kathy's question about a proposal to install cameras inside schools. And your response was that it has been entered into, it has been entered as a 2018-19 budget request. What exactly does that mean? Does that mean everything that we've ever brought up that we want has been entered into the 2018-19?
No, these
Budget
are
request.
internal cabinet process.
Okay, so how do we know if our requests have been entered into anything? Because, you know, has dyslexia screener been entered? Has reduced class sizes been entered? Has full-day kindergarten been entered? Has reinstating a culture survey been entered? Like, how do you get entered as a budget request?
That's a great question.
Thank you.
Something, it's not my request, it was the principal's request. It was all the high school principals' request. They made that request through you,
I'm
so I just want to
looking at the
clarify
email that
I
was
know.
it was your question on the email, Kathy's question.
But
That's-
it's not, I just want to be clear that it's separate than a step, that came through the principals, it wasn't my request.
I understand.
I don't have an answer for you on how board members get specific dollar amount requests entered into the budget. I would suggest that's a process for board leadership and superintendent.
Yeah,
to-
I mean, I think that could be something, I think that's a follow-on to the email that you sent out yesterday about individual board member requests that may not be supported or entered by cabinet simultaneously.
Right.
So that's might be the topic for discussion on February 4th that we want to specifically examine.
That would be great.
The third, and I am so sorry, Kathy, for getting that wrong for the 5th time. Okay.
I just have a quick question. Can you explain what's going on with the bond redemption fund and how that relates to authorized adjustments to future mill levies? I've read that a couple times and I got lost.
that fund is using a little bit of fund balance. And so again, it's that math that says how much money is sitting there at the end of the year and how much end of prior year and the end of the next year. And that math with all the revenues in and the expenditures out says we're using some small amount, to a couple $1 million of fund balance to pay the current year expenditures. The money's in there, money's available. We are authorized to set the mill levy to collect the appropriate amount of money to make payments. So it's not like we have overextended ourselves on an ongoing basis within that fund. It just is a statement that says we can adjust mill levies to make appropriate revenue collections in future years.
I might in a minute when we go to approve this, but that's all.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and we'll do a motion to approve. Okay, second, Richard? Okay. Laura, do you want to call the vote?
Can we have discussion now on that?
Oh,
Yeah, just, not about a
Okay.
specific request, but about process. Right? So I just want to make sure that if I vote to approve this revised budget, that we are going to be able to revisit it, since we did not even discuss this CTE equipment or this ERP upgrade that we've discussed, but we hadn't prior to this. So if we approve this budget, are we still going to be able to discuss these things at our board retreat or in a work session or somewhere, so that we can revisit this before we start spending money?
well, I don't know about the CTE, so that's a question for staff, because I think if we're doing this, we're committing that money now.
Okay.
And but it's different with the ERP because we have the RFP that slows it down. So my guess is that the CTE is going to try to go get a contract. If the contract is over 100,000, we'll have to approve it.
Mark, could you help us, please? I think the question is this: do we need to approve the funds for CTE, and will they be expended? I believe. Tina, is that the right question?
That's not exactly my question.
Not
My
exactly.
question is, how did CTE get in here when we have a list of other things that we wanted to spend one-time funds on? And how does that conversation happen if I approve this budget tonight?
Okay, so how does CTE become part of this budget? Is it because we've gone through the visioning process and we're expanding our CTE options?
Right, so within the next several weeks, high school students will be registering for their courses for the 18-19 school year. And CTE courses will be on the course registration list. If we don't approve these funds, they won't be able to run those programs at Arapahoe campus, because they rely on, we've scrubbed the budget to the base amount that we need to run the programs that we want to offer. So if we don't approve this, we don't spend the money, and then we don't run these particular programs. We're not going to, so that would be the answer.
I understand that, but why did this just come up?
It was a long visioning process, and so it really was a 2-year process to really study. We did provide updates to the board in terms of what we were looking at in programs. Programs have costs. The moment that we landed on our programs and what we visioned on, then we immediately went to cost that to see how much it was. So we certainly could delay the visioning for a year, but the costs are constant. That's how much they cost to run the programs.
So I just don't understand this process. I get that you've been visioning off where you vision, but other people have been visioning off where they vision.
Right.
And somehow this got down here and theirs didn't. So what's the process?
So can we talk about that at our retreat? I mean, I'm personally comfortable with these costs, and I would imagine priorities change over time. And there are some needs that bubble up that are sometimes unexpected, but I think we can talk about it at our retreat. And we can try to see if someone from budget can join us. I know it's going to be tricky. It's a Saturday, so we have to think about that. Or we can do it in work session next Tuesday, which is another possibility, because we have that hour after the first meeting. We have a motion to approve the budget. Oh, Donna, you want to go first?
One question. If we do approve it, my question is, with that surplus, we're still going to be able, as a board, to talk about where we will spend other priorities?
Because we
Do I
still have a
understand?
fund balance.
Yes.
Yeah, Bill, can you help us with that one? Can you talk a little bit about what the process will look like moving forward? So we approved this tonight, and then we still haven't determined what the new expenditures are for the fall, or for the new budget year.
Correct. For next year, we're working through the process, the priorities, the individual requests, the whole budget process for next year. These are either setting aside dollars, knowing that we'll have costs relative to the ERP system, or something like this CTE programming that I'm assuming a call to the purchasing department and ramping up some RFPs around some of that equipment starting tomorrow, so that it can be ordered and installed and in place for August 15th-ish.
So you're not approving a new budget. You're approving revisions in this year's budget based on what we see as priorities.
I know that. Tina? So after we approve this tonight, we will have $3.2 million in an ending fund balance still.
Correct.
So if any time before June 30th, we decide we want to spend that on something else, we can do that.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions before we take a vote on this? Okay, Laura, do you want to call the roll? Vote, sorry.
Benford.
Yes.
Fuqua is not present. Garcia.
Yes.
Gebhardt. Yes. Marquis.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Sergeant.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Excuse me. And our final item is agenda setting. And just on a related note, Laura has been working on the RFI form, so I think she's going to send out a new link in the next week, maybe, or?
I can probably get that out tomorrow.
Okay, and we'll be trying to use this RFI form moving forward, so that should be easier. And I had a couple items. One is at the, just to pull the board, whoops, but Donna just left. Is she okay?
Can we just wait a second?
Yeah, we'll just take. I just wanted to pull a couple things. We had our first discussion about HB 1375 last week, which is the charter mill allocation. And I just wanted, the charter schools asked us via email to have a conversation with us. I wanted to make sure that was okay with board members, that we could put on that to be scheduled. Is that okay with everyone? Yeah. Okay, great. And so we will set up some time for that. The other piece is Randy Barber has had some great ideas about including some more recognition for some of the students and teachers and administrators in our district, and spending a little bit of board time recognizing some individuals that are contributing to our district. Is everyone okay spending a little bit time? I know, and I value all of our time, but does that sound okay with everyone? Okay, great. So I had those two. And then the last piece is, I think at our retreat, we'll try to do the committee appointments. We've delayed those a little bit. If you have specific committees, we have a long list of committees, but if you have specific committees you're interested in, I do have the Boulder liaison, Boulder City liaison down, and the legislative liaison. Just email me, and I'll try to get it all together and make sure that we have the ones that you are interested in being on. Yes.
Does every committee need to have a board person?
No, no.
Okay, are there some committees that must have a board person?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and then we'll go through all that. So I'll try to get it before the retreat, but I'm not, well, I'll do my best. But that being said, what other topics do people want to add to agenda setting? So, and if you can see in the board docs, there's a list of items. This doesn't mean that we've agreed to discuss them necessarily. It just means that they're items that board members have mentioned that they want to discuss. Anything anyone wants to add? Do you want to just email it to me, and then we'll add it to the list, and then put it for either a prioritization meeting or an agenda setting meeting?
Okay,
that work?
I mean, I already did email it.
Yeah.
But email it again?
Yeah, I can get that one because I know where they
Okay.
are, but they were sort of in there. And then you'll pick up the 3 RFIs you had and
Yes.
send them separately with the
Yes.
form. Great.
So you've got the agenda items.
I've
and
got
I
the agenda items, you've got the RFIs.
Can I
Okay.
ask a process question, Tina? So I'm picking up that at our board retreat, we'll talk a little about agenda setting, and then the next time we formally talk about it is on the 20th. Is that, do I have the process down right? Because, I know we've changed the 20th because we have superintendent candidates starting at 5, but will we be
Right.
doing agendas? I'm just trying to get a sense
So
of
we're
the.
going to do agenda setting on the 20th.
Okay.
Yep.
So what would be the process to begin discussions about full-day kindergarten? We would start with an RFI, or how would that
We
work?
would start with an RFI, though we have multiple RFIs on full-day
Okay.
kindergarten, so
Okay.
in the board docs library, there's some information on that. I don't think staff is recommending full-day kindergarten for this year,
Mhm.
but it might be
I
something.
mean, this year, do you mean?
18, 19.
Yeah, next year? Yeah.
Right. I
Yeah.
don't, that's my understanding. I'm not
Okay.
sure.
We did an update for the board, I believe, before you were on the board, so I can make sure you get a copy of that, which was the update we gave to the board about where we currently are. And Donna, maybe you don't have it either, I don't know, but we can get it to you. And it's a financial issue
Yeah,
at
of
this
course.
point. I don't think anybody's opposed to full-day kindergarten, but,
Okay, thank you.
okay.
I think that's what we're going to try to talk about at the retreat, is how do we get board issues on agendas and what is our process, and kind of
Right.
getting some clarity around that. That's why I don't want to bring it up now, because then hopefully we can get more clarity at the retreat and then do it on the 20th.
Right. Okay. Anything else, board members? All right, thank you so much, and I'd like to adjourn this meeting.